On today's early edition at 6, the U.S. plans to impose new sanctions on North Korea targeting its financial links to the world as part of a continued punishment for the cyber attack on Sony Pictures. Charlie Hebdo's new cover features a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad raising concerns about the possibility of more violence in France. And this year is expected to be a good one for Korean exporters. The country's all-important exports to China are forecast to rebound after the first fall in 5 years in 2014. Stay with us for these and more. Welcome to Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And this is Daniel Che. Good to have you with us. The United States is moving to seal North Korea off from the international financial system.
That's right, and it's designed to starve the leadership in Pyongyang of cold, hard cash. The latest development comes after President Obama launched new sanctions against the regime for its alleged hacking of Sony Pictures.
And our Shin Se-min starts us off.
The U.S. is targeting the remaining financial links North Korea has to the international financial system in retaliation for Pyongyang's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures late last year. Speaking before members of Congress Tuesday, Daniel Glaser, Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing at the U.S. Treasury, said past sanctions had already stopped hundreds of overseas banks from doing business with the North, but said the U.S. could go further.
So we could target any North Korean government agency, we could target any North Korean government official, and then once so targeted, we could apply sanctions with respect to any individual or entity who's providing them in turn material support, or any individual entity that they in turn control.
Glaser said the U.S. is targeting the North Korean elite source of hard currency and its ability to send back cash through Chinese commercial banks to increase the cost for North Korea. An Sung-kim, the top U.S. official on North Korea, who was also at the briefing, said that Pyongyang is losing friends, even its longtime ally, China.
I think what we have seen in our cooperation with China is that China is working with us more effectively and trying to stifle North Korea's dangerous activities. And it's an ongoing effort. I think all of us need to do more, including China.
Regarding the North's recent cozying up with Russia, the U.S. official said Moscow remains committed to the shared goal of denuclearization. Responding to critics who say the sanctions don't go far enough, Kim said the latest measures are very strong and they'll allow Washington to target anyone that tries to provide material support to the North. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea has stepped up its criticism of the U.S. after Washington rejected its offer to cancel joint military drills with South Korea in exchange for a temporary suspension of nuclear tests. The North has also cautioned the U.S. against meddling in inter-Korean affairs, blaming it for stirring up confrontation on the peninsula. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
After offering to temporarily suspend its nuclear tests for an end to joint South Korea-U.S. military drills, North Korea proposed direct talks with the United States. In a press conference on Tuesday, North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN said it was willing to explain the offer, but claimed Washington's rejection reflected its hostility.
The United States has shown once again that they will continue to increase attack military capabilities in the South Korea, while requesting us to not to have our own national defense capabilities.
Seoul and Washington insist their annual training exercises, scheduled for March, are defensive in nature, but Pyongyang sees them as a practice for war. In its state-run Dodong Sinmun newspaper on Wednesday, North Korea advised the U.S. to step out of inter-Korean affairs. The paper claimed that Washington has always stirred up confrontation whenever there were signs of easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. It called on South Korea to work together with the North to counter the American interference. Analysts see this as part of North Korea's efforts to increase pressure on Seoul. President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had both expressed their willingness to improve ties in the new year. But while North Korea blames Washington for disturbing the mood for dialogue, it has yet to respond to South Korea's offer for talks, which was made over 2 weeks ago. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And trading volume between the two Koreas hit a record high last year, with the amount exceeding $2.1 billion. Korea's Customs Service says that is the highest amount recorded since the service started logging the data in 1997. Most of the items traded were raw materials, though. Inter-Korean trade has surged since the complex began operating in 2005.
China and Japan are trying to ease the escalating tensions over an island chain in the East China Sea that both countries claim. The two countries agreed to set up a special maritime hotline to prevent clashes in this area earlier this week. Not a lot of details have been released, but the two sides agreed to operate the hotline soon. This was their first such discussion in over 2.5 years. But it's not all optimism on the part of China. Its foreign ministry has once again called on Japan to accept history and truth when announcing the agreement. And Japan says South Korea should not attach any preconditions to their leaders' summit. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said Tuesday the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement should not be used politically or diplomatically. This comes a day after President Park Geun-hye called on Japan to change its stance in order to make the summit meaningful and productive in her New Year's press conference.
A representative of Korea's ruling party is expected to deliver a message from President Park Geun-hye to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Ruling Saenuri Party Supreme Council member Seo Chung-won is now in Japan for a 3-day visit with a group of Korean lawmakers affiliated with the Korea-Japan Parliamentarians Union. He is expected to meet with Abe on Thursday. Lawmakers say the message is not in the form of an official letter, but will be delivered in person and includes suggestions for ways to improve relations between Seoul and Tokyo. Now, all eyes are on whether the message will include any suggestion of a summit between the two leaders as an event that has never taken place under the current Park administration. The chairman of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party says the party's goal for the year is to revitalize the economy and boost cooperation with the main opposition party. In his New Year's address on Wednesday, Kim Moo-sung said Korea should not miss the golden time to boost the economy and push through reforms to avoid Japan-style stagnation. The party chief pointed out the need to reform the public pension system, saying the state budget is running tight. He also said the ruling party will work closely with the opposition to ensure state affairs run smoothly.
A week after the terror attack at Charlie Hebdo, the magazine is hitting back with a defiant issue, complete with a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad on its cover. The image has already attracted a firestorm of criticism and some threats, putting all the friends on edge. Call them reckless, call them brave. Regardless, it is flying off the shelves even as we speak. Our Son Jung-in has this story.
Paris remains on high alert with armed police and soldiers stepping up inspections around institutions, public places, media outlets, and Jewish schools. More threats of terror attacks have emerged in the country, including one from an al-Qaeda offshoot in North Africa. It threatened to carry out more strikes on French soil if the satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo publishes the latest edition, which has a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad on the front cover. The newspaper has already unveiled the front page of the January 14th edition. It shows a caricature of the Prophet holding a sign that says, "I am Charlie" in French, under the banner, "All is forgiven."
Then there was nothing else but this idea of drawing Muhammad, "I am Charlie," and I looked at him. He was crying, And over it I wrote, "All is forgiven." I cried, and it was the front page.
French Muslim leaders urged their community to remain calm and respect the right to freedom of expression. Prime Minister Emmanuel Valls said France was at war against terrorism and extremism, not against Islam. The Muslim community is France's second largest religious group. Meanwhile, separate ceremonies were held in Paris and Jerusalem for the victims of last week's terror attacks. President François Hollande led a solemn ceremony paying tribute to 3 police officers who were killed in the line of duty. In Israel, thousands mourn the passing of 4 Jewish Frenchmen gunned down in an attack at a kosher supermarket on Friday. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And President Barack Obama is preparing a plan to boost cybersecurity amid news of major hack attacks against U.S. companies like Sony Pictures. Cybersecurity has jumped to the top of the leaders' agenda this year, and the White House is said to already be in talks with leaders of the Republican-led Congress, where related bills will be debated and potentially passed. President Obama wants to offer incentives for information sharing to companies hit by cyber attacks. He also wants to create new powers for law enforcement to probe and prosecute cybercrime and hand courts power to shut down entities found to have launched denial-of-service attacks. Pope Francis has kicked off his week-long tour through Asian countries. He is in Sri Lanka now, where he called for a pursuit of truth, not for the sake of opening old wounds, but rather as a necessary means of promoting justice, healing, and unity. Sri Lanka is still dealing with the effects of a quarter-century-long civil war amid lingering accusations of atrocities. Pope Francis also beatified the country's first saint in a public mass, Indian-born missionary Joseph Vaz, who was captured in Ceylon on accusations of being a spy. This is the first time the majority Buddhist nation has hosted a pontiff since the end of its civil war back in 2009.
Korea's exports to China are projected to rebound this year after a poor 2014, which saw Korea's shipments to the world's second largest economy dip for the first time in 5 years. Connie Kim has more.
Korea's exports to China are forecast to rebound this year. According to a survey conducted by Kotra, outbound shipments to China are expected to jump 4.5% to $147 billion in 2015. That's because of the economic recovery forecast in the United States, which is expected to raise Beijing's outbound shipments to the U.S. About half of Korean exports to China are intermediary goods that are used to manufacture finished products and are re-exported to the U.S. and Europe. Experts also say the free trade agreement between Korea and China that's expected to take effect in the second half of this year will boost Korea's outbound shipments to its largest trading partner. Last year, however, Korea's exports to China dropped for the first time in 5 years. Sluggish recoveries in China and Europe were mainly to blame for the drop. The fall also came from China improving their own supply capacity of parts and intermediary goods. And experts point out that local exporters should now focus on shipping finished goods to China. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
There is an economic disconnect here in Korea. On the one hand, many Koreans complain that the quality of their life keeps getting worse. On the other, data shows the Korean economy is doing okay. And in other words, fruits of economic growth are not channeled to households. For a look at why this might be happening, Kwon Soo-ah reports.
Days of growth at a breakneck pace have long gone, but still the Korean economy has steadily grown in recent years, even after the 2008 global financial crisis. But surveys show 8 out of 10 Koreans don't think their life is better than before.
Life is really hard. It's hard for the unwealthy people. Something must be done about the economy.
Statistics Korea says the size of the country's middle class is contracting. Back in 1990, some 75% of the nation's population was categorized as middle class. Now the percentage has dropped to below 70. Those belonging to the poorest bracket, on the other hand, jumped from 7 to nearly 12%. In the past 24 years, the average monthly income for Korean households grew by 3.7 times at current prices. That's dwarfed by a six-fold jump in GDP. In other words, fruits of economic growth are not channeled to households. This is attributed to the nation's companies benefiting more from growth. Citing such problems on Tuesday, the leader of the main opposition party, Moon Hee-sang, stressed the need to give a helping hand to the nation's low-income bracket.
There's no more trickle-down effect. The conglomerate safes are filled with money, but the ordinary people's wallets are only overwhelmed with bills.
Experts say a new approach for growth is needed, giving priority to improving productivity. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And the number of people who found work last year in Korea made its biggest leap in 12 years. But that does not necessarily mean the country's employment situation is improving. Choi Yoo-sun reports.
The number of Koreans who found jobs in 2014 jumped a 12-year high. Statistics Korea says nearly 25.6 million people found work last year, up more than 530,000 compared to the year 2013. Looking back at the past 5 years, the yearly increase in the number of people with new jobs had expanded significantly. The country's employment rate also gained slightly to reach a 17-year high of 60.2%. By industry, new jobs were created in manufacturing and health and welfare, while fewer jobs were gained in agriculture, fisheries, and finance. However, experts say a large portion of the newly employed were previously inactive in the economy. Many of them are in their 50s and 60s and have returned to the workforce in temporary positions. That, coupled with a decline in the number of jobs for people in their 30s, shows that Korea's job market remains unstable. In fact, the unemployment rate was the highest for young people from the ages of 15 to 29, jumping to 9%. The unemployment rate has also climbed steadily in recent years. What's even more grim for this group is that 1 out of every 5 young people who found jobs started with contracts of less than a year. A recent OECD report said only 11% of temporary workers in Korea secured permanent employment after a year, and the rest either remained or were let go. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
There's always something you can learn from a country that's so tiny yet economically mighty. A local research institute has suggested Korea follow Singapore's footsteps when it comes to securing more investment from overseas. The Korea Economic Research Institute says while a country's GDP is linked to its ability to bring in foreign direct investment, Singapore, a nation whose GDP is only a quarter that of Korea's, competes for foreign direct investments with giants like the US and China. That was attributed to Singapore's flexible labor market, limited regulations, and low taxes. A UN ranking placed Singapore 6th in terms of foreign direct investments in 2013, with a total of $64 billion. Korea, on the other hand, was ranked 21st with a total of $12 billion, a GDP to foreign direct investment inflow ratio of 1%. Oil prices have tumbled near a 6-year low on Tuesday as big OPEC producers stood by the group's decision not to cut output. And it looks like it will continue to go down, down, and down. Our Connie Lee has more.
It's another drop in oil prices. Crude prices slumped to almost a 6-year low on Tuesday, with Brent trading around the same level as U.S. crude oil. U.S. crude lost 5% at $45.89 a barrel, and Brent plunged 7% to $46.59. Oil prices tumbled after major OPEC producers, such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, defended the group's decision not to cut output. Oil prices have dropped 60% in just over 6 months due to rising production, such as more U.S. shale oil and weaker demand in Europe and Asia. And if you thought oil prices have gone as low as they can go, think again. Analysts believe the prices will dip even more. In recent days, many global investment banks have cut their oil forecasts, saying the prices need to stay low for longer in order to end a global supply glut. For instance, U.S. bank Goldman Sachs slashed this year's forecast for Brent from about $84 a barrel to about $50. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Samsung Group is set to invest around $46 billion this year for facilities and research and development. A Samsung official revealed on Wednesday that this year's amount is similar to what the company spent last year. Samsung Electronics, the flagship of Samsung Group, said about $22 billion will be spent on its three main sectors: memory chips, display, and mobile. According to marketing analysts, the conglomerate has been steadily increasing its investment from about $39 billion since the year 2011.
And ballet dancers, opera singers, and the polka are part of a special performance that's only in town for a night.
And according to our Imuni, that's not all. She brings a preview of that and another special event offering Seoulites a glimpse into relics from the lost city of Pompeii.
The Vienna Waltz Orchestra, a globe-trotting chamber orchestra known for its performance of traditional Viennese waltzes, marches, and polkas. They're set to touch down in Seoul, bringing with them soprano Bettina Schweiger. They'll be performing a few favorites by Johann Strauss II, Brahms' classic Hungarian Dance No. 5, and a few other pieces from the polka repertoire. The orchestra will be led by founding conductor Sandro Culturello. Beautiful, lush greenery in an ancient city that once had a running water system, an amphitheater, a gymnasium, and a port. The people of the Roman city of Pompeii were crushed under 6 meters of pumice and ash after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, bearing with them all of their belongings. 300 artifacts from the ruined city have been put on display at the National Museum of Korea, including tools, weapons, charred loaves of bread, and even the casts entombing the victims, preserved under the ashes for almost 2,000 years. The exhibition gives viewers a unique glimpse into the luxurious lifestyles found in the Vesuvian city.
In Pompeii, we have not a museum, so you have to see, it's possible to see this magnificent object here, but not in Pompeii.
Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
As we talked a little bit about earlier, is the sky falling, or is there something wrong with this world, or is it just Korea? It's feeling like spring even though we're still in the middle of winter, right?
I know, but I think everyone is thinking the same thing. Is this a permanent shift in the weather, or are we in for another cold spell? For answers, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. The nation is looking a bit cloudy these days, but a warm weather continued here in Korea. And with the early spring-like weather, the camellias have already started to bloom on Jeju Island. Now, due to the low-pressure trough, it's currently raining on Jeju Island and along the southern coast, and up to 5 millimeters is expected to fall along the coast until tonight. Then the rainfall will bring a lot more on Jeju Island, up to 20 millimeters through tomorrow. Now, as far as I can tell, the temperatures will remain mild all throughout the week, hovering above freezing with cloudy skies, and warmer conditions are expected here in Seoul tomorrow. Now to our readings for tomorrow. Seoul will start off the Thursday morning at -3 and gets up higher at 7 degrees. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will be at 9 and 11. And to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 9, Dokdo hits to 5, while Bangkok dips to the negatives at -2 degrees. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's a wrap for us. Good day to those of you in different time zones, and thank you all for watching. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Hwang Jie. To our viewers in Korea, have a good rest of the evening. We'll be back with more at the same time tomorrow.